He was a threat who wasn't some criminal. He was a threat because he knew how to stand his ground back in the day, and in doing that, he stood for his people real hard. He wasn't going to stop. He wasn't going to back down. This was what he did wrong to the American system.
Bobby Seale is going through all types of physical and mental torture. But that's all right, because we said even before this happened, and we're going to say it after this, and after I'm locked up, and after everybody's locked up, that you can jail a revolutionary, but you can't jail a revolution. Right. You might run a liberator like Aaron Cleave out the country, but you can't run liberation out the country. You might murder a freedom fighter like Bobby Hutton, but you can't murder freedom fighting. And if you do, you come up with answers that don't answer, explanations that don't explain. You come up with conclusions that don't conclude. And you come up with people that you thought should be acting like pigs, that's acting like people and moving on pigs. And that's what we've got to do. So we're going to see about Bobby, regardless of what these people think we should do. Because school is not important and work is not important. Nothing's more important than stopping fascism.
From a very young age, Fred Hampton had always had that drive to fight for his people, the blacks. His entire 21 years on planet Earth says it all. Right from his personal life, his days at school down to his social life. Fred Hampton's activism began in the early 1960s during a pivotal moment in the United States when the struggle for racial justice was gaining momentum and the nation stood at a turning point in its civil rights journey.
I'm the deputy chairman of the state of Illinois, Black Panther Party, Fred Hampton. And a lot of people don't understand the Black Panther Party's relationship with white mother country radicals. A lot of people don't even understand that word that Elrich uses a lot. But what we're saying is that there are white people in the mother country that are for the same type of things that we are for stimulating revolution in the mother country. And we said that we'll work with anybody and form coalition with anybody that has revolution on their mind. We're not a racist organization because we understand that racism is an excuse used for capitalism. And we know that racism is a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people. And we're going to have to put it back in the hands of the people. Everybody in the state of Illinois.
In his brief 21 years of existence, Fred Hampton dedicated himself to the fight against racism and injustice faced by black people in America. His message was clear and unwavering. Revolution was the only path forward. He challenged the black community to speak up boldly, declaring that they had spent too long listening to empty promises. According to Hampton, change wouldn't come through silence or patience. It required action, unity, and a revolutionary spirit.
We're going to have to do more than talk. We're going to have to do more than listen. We're going to even have to do more than learn. We're going to have to start practicing, and that's very hard. We're going to have to start learning, and you learn through practice. We got to start making mistakes, and you learn through making mistakes. We got to start getting out there with the people. And a lot of times we think we're better than the people, but that's an insult, and that's criminal. Think you're better than the people. We got to get together and learn where it's at.
He urged every member of his audience to take action, not just to listen, but to move, to organize, and to resist. He spoke boldly and fiercely with no trace of fear in his voice or presence. Tragically, as was the fate of many outspoken black activists of the era, his courage made him a target. And like too many before him, that bravery led him to an early grave.
December 4th, 1969. Akua Njeri was 19 years old and sleeping next to her fiancé, the Illinois Black Panther Party chairman, Fred Hampton.
The next thing I remember was someone in our room shaking Chairman Fred. Chairman, wake up, wake up. Plaster was flying off the wall. You could smell the cordite from the gunshot. If you've ever been under gunfire, 5 minutes is 5 hours. To you, it seems like forever. The shooting started back again. Then another voice unfamiliar to me said, "He's good and dead now." I knew they were talking about
it. It was really gruesome. The pain Akua Njeri, Fred Hampton's 19-year-old fiancé, had to go through. In 1 minute, she was lying on the same bed with her fiancé, who was hale and hearty, and in another minute, he was gone. Gone to a path of no return, leaving behind their 8 months unborn child. It wasn't easy for her as a teenager. The tragic story of Fred Hampton, a brilliant, ambitious young leader is as inspiring as it is heartbreaking. His life embodied courage, conviction, and an unshakable dedication to justice. Though only 21 when he was killed, Hampton's fearless activism and unwavering commitment to Black liberation left a legacy that still echoes today. As we uncover the truth behind his life and assassination, we'd like you to support our effort by hitting the thumbs up button before you, share video with as many as you can, and subscribe to stay tuned into the channel to support the continued telling of all hidden and untold Black history. Now let us dive into the remarkable life and legacy of Fred Hampton. Fred Hampton, Deputy Chairman of the Illinois chapter of the Black Panther Party, was born on August 30th, 1948 in present-day Summit, Argo, Illinois, commonly known as Summit. At the age of 10, he moved with his parents to Maywood, another suburb of Chicago. His parents had migrated from Louisiana as part of the Great Migration, during which millions of African Americans left the South in search of better opportunities. Both of his parents worked at the Argo Starch Company, a cornstarch processor. From a young age, Hampton showed exceptional promise both academically and athletically. He dreamed of playing center field for the New York Yankees. At just 10 years old, he began organizing weekend breakfasts for children in his neighborhood, personally preparing the meals, a gesture that foreshadowed the Black Panther Party's later free breakfast program. In high school, he emerged as a student leader, organizing walkouts to protest the exclusion of Black students from the Homecoming Queen competition and demanding the hiring of more Black teachers and administrators. Hampton graduated from Proviso East High School in 1966 with honors, varsity athletic letters, and a Junior Achievement Award. In that same year, Fred Hampton turned 18. At that time, he started identifying with the Third World socialist struggles, as well as reading communist revolutionaries Che Guevara, Ho Chi Minh, and Mao Zedong. Shortly after, Hampton urged not only peace in the Vietnam War, but also North Vietnam's victory. Within a short while, Hampton became active in the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP, and assumed leadership of its West Suburban Branch's Youth Council. In his capacity as an NAACP youth organizer, he demonstrated leadership abilities. From a community of 27,000, he was able to muster a youth group of 500 strong members. He worked to get more and better recreational facilities established in the neighborhoods and to improve educational resources for Maywood's impoverished Black community. In 1968, Hampton was accused of assaulting an ice cream truck driver, stealing $71 worth of ice cream bars and giving them to children in the street. He was convicted in May 1969 and served time in prison. In a memoir, Frank B. Wilderson III places this incident in the context of COINTELPRO efforts to disrupt the Black Panthers of Chicago by the leveling of trumped-up charges. In 1969, Hampton, now deputy chairman of the Black Panther Party Illinois chapter, conducted a meeting condemning sexism. After 1969, the party officially considered sexism counter-revolutionary. By 1970, about 40 to 70% of party members were women. Over the next year, Hampton and his friends and associates achieved many successes in Chicago. Perhaps the most important was a non-aggression pact among Chicago's most powerful street gangs. Emphasizing that racial and ethnic conflict among gangs would only keep its members entrenched in poverty, Hampton strove to forge an anti-racist, class-conscious, multiracial alliance among the Black Panther Party, the Young Patriots organization, and the Young Lords under the leadership of Jose Chacha Jimenez, leading to the Rainbow Coalition. Hampton met the Young Lords in Chicago's Lincoln Park neighborhood the day after they were in the news for occupying a police community workshop at the Chicago 18th District Police Station. He was arrested twice with Jimenez at the Wicker Park Welfare Office, and both were charged with mob action at a peaceful picket of the office. Later, the Rainbow Coalition was joined nationwide by Students for a Democratic Society, SDS, the Brown Berets, AIM, and the Red Guard Party. In May 1969, Hampton called a press conference to announce that the coalition had formed. What the coalition groups would do was based on common action. Some of their joint issues were poverty, anti-racism, corruption, police brutality, and substandard housing. If there was a protest or a demonstration, the groups would attend the event and support each other. On numerous occasions, Jeffrey Haas, Fred Hampton's lawyer, praised Hampton's political vision and his success in uniting various movements. However, Haas later expressed criticism of the Black Panther Party's organizational structure, describing it as pyramidal or vertical. He contrasted this with the more decentralized, horizontal structure adopted by later movements like Black Lives Matter. Haas noted,
"They may also have picked up on the vulnerability of a hierarchical movement, where you have one leader, which makes the movement very vulnerable if that leader is imprisoned, killed, or otherwise compromised. I think the fact that Black Lives Matter says we're leaderful, not leaderless, perhaps makes them less vulnerable to this kind of government assault."
Hampton rose quickly in the Black Panthers based on his organizing skills, oratorical gifts, and charisma. Once he became leader of the Chicago chapter, he organized weekly rallies, participated in strikes, worked closely with the Black Panther Party's local People's Clinic, taught political education classes every morning at 6 a.m., and launched a project for community supervision of the police. Hampton was also instrumental in the Black Panther Party's free breakfast program. When Bob Brown left the party with Kwame Ture in the FBI-fomented SNCC/Panther split, Hampton assumed chairmanship of the Illinois State Black Panther Party. This automatically made him a national BPPP deputy chairman. As the FBI's COINTELPRO began to decimate the nationwide Panther leadership, Hampton's prominence in the national hierarchy increased rapidly and dramatically. The FBI believed that Hampton's leadership and talent for communication made him a major threat among Black Panther leaders. It began keeping close tabs on his activities. Investigations have shown that FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover was determined to prevent the formation of a cohesive Black movement in the United States. Hoover believed the Panthers, Young Patriots, Young Lords, and similar radical coalitions that Hampton forged in Chicago were a stepping stone to the rise of a revolution that could cause a radical change in the U.S. government. The FBI opened a file on Hampton in 1967. It tapped Hampton's mother's phone in February 1968 and by May placed Hampton on the Bureau's Agitator Index as a key militant leader. In late 1968, the Racial Matters Squad of the FBI's Chicago field office recruited William O'Neill to work with it. He had recently been arrested twice for interstate car theft and impersonating a federal officer. In exchange for having his felony charges dropped and receiving a monthly stipend, O'Neill agreed to infiltrate the Black Panther Party as a counterintelligence operative. O'Neill joined the party and quickly rose in the organization, becoming director of chapter security and Hampton's bodyguard. In 1969, the FBI Special Agent in Charge, SAC, in San Francisco, wrote to Hoover that the agent's investigation had found that, in his city at least, the Panthers were primarily feeding breakfast to children. Hoover responded with a memo implying that the agent's career prospects depended on his supplying evidence to support Hoover's view that the Black Panther Party was a violence-prone organization seeking to overthrow the government by revolutionary means. Using anonymous letters, the FBI sowed distrust and eventually instigated a split between the Panthers and the Blackstone Rangers. O'Neill instigated an armed clash between them on April 2, 1969. The Panthers became effectively isolated from their power base in the Chicago ghetto, so the FBI worked to undermine its ties with other radical organizations. O'Neill was instructed to create a rift between the party and Students for a Democratic Society, whose Chicago headquarters was near that of the Panthers. The FBI released a batch of racist cartoons in the Panthers' name, aimed at alienating white activists. It also launched a disinformation program to forestall the formation of the Rainbow Coalition, but the Black Panther Party did make an alliance with the Young Patriots and Young Lords. In repeated directives, Hoover demanded that COINTELPRO personnel investigate the Rainbow Coalition, destroy what the Black Panther Party stands for, and eradicate its Serve the People programs. Documents secured by Senate investigators in the early 1970s revealed that the FBI actively encouraged violence between the Panthers and other radical groups. This provoked multiple murders in cities throughout the country. On July 16, 1969, an armed confrontation between party members and the Chicago Police Department resulted in one Black Panther Party member being mortally wounded and 6 others arrested on serious charges. In early October, Hampton and his girlfriend, Deborah Johnson, now known as Aquanjeri, who was pregnant with their child, Fred Hampton Jr., rented a 4.5-room apartment at 2337 West Monroe Street to be closer to Black Panther Party headquarters. O'Neal also reported to his superiors that much of the Panthers' provocative arms stockpile was stored there. He drew them a map of the apartment. In early November, Hampton traveled to California on a speaking engagement with the UCLA Law Students Association. He met with the remaining Black Panther Party national hierarchy, who appointed him to the party's central committee. He was soon to take the position of chief of staff and major spokesman. He would have achieved this position had he not been killed. On the night of November the 13th, 1969, while Hampton was still in California, Chicago police officers John J. Gilhooly and Frank G. Rappaport were killed in a gun battle with Panthers, of which one of them died the next day. In the aftermath of that gun battle, a total number of 9 police officers were shot. Spurgeon Winter Jr., a 19-year-old Panther, was killed by the police. Another Panther, Lawrence S. Bell, was charged with murder. In an unsigned editorial headlined "No Quarter for Wild Beasts," the Chicago Tribune urged that Chicago police officers approaching the suspected Panthers should be ordered to be ready to shoot. As part of the larger COINTELPRO operation, the FBI was determined to prevent any improvement in the effectiveness of the Black Panther Party leadership. The FBI orchestrated an armed raid with the Chicago police and Cook County State's attorney on Hampton's Chicago apartment. They had obtained detailed information about the apartment, including a layout of furniture from O'Neal. An augmented 14-man team of the State Special Prosecutions Unit, formerly abbreviated as SAO, was organized for a pre-dawn raid. They were armed with a search warrant for illegal weapons. On the evening of December 3rd, Hampton taught a political education course at a local church, which was attended by most Panther members. Afterward, as was typical, he was accompanied to his Monroe Street apartment by Johnson and several Panthers, amongst whom are Blair Anderson, James Grady, Ronald Doc Satchel, Harold Bell, Verlena Brewer, Lewis, Trulock, Brenda Harris, and Mark Clark. O'Neal was already there, having prepared a late dinner, which the group ate around midnight. O'Neal had slipped the secobarbital into a drink that Hampton consumed during the dinner to sedate Hampton so he would not awaken during the subsequent raid. O'Neal left after dinner. At about 1:30 a.m., December 4th, Hampton fell asleep mid-sentence while talking to his mother on the telephone. Although Hampton was not known to take drugs, Cook County chemist Eleanor Berman later reported that she had run 2 tests, each showing evidence of barbiturates in Hampton's blood. An FBI chemist failed to find similar traces, but Berman stood by her findings. The office of Cook County State's Attorney Edward Hanrahan organized the raid, using officers attached to his office. Hampton had recently strongly criticized Hanrahan, saying that Hanrahan's talk about a war on gangs was really rhetoric used to enable him to carry out a war on black youth. Around 4 a.m. on December 4th, a heavily armed police unit arrived at Fred Hampton's apartment, splitting into 2 teams, 8 officers positioned at the front of the building and 6 at the rear. At approximately 4:45 a.m., they stormed the residence. Mark Clark, just 22 years old at the time, was seated in the front room on security duty with a shotgun resting in his lap. He was shot in the chest and killed instantly. According to another account, Clark may have answered the door before being immediately shot by police. Either way, his shotgun discharged a single round into the ceiling, a reflexive trigger pull caused by the convulsions of his death. That lone shot was the only one fired by the Panthers. Fred Hampton, heavily sedated with barbiturates, was still asleep on a mattress in the bedroom alongside Deborah Johnson, his fiancée, who was just 18 years old and 8.5 months pregnant at the time. As police stormed the apartment, officers forcibly removed his fiancée from the room while Hampton remained unconscious in bed. The raiding team then opened fire toward the head of the south bedroom. Hampton was struck in the shoulder during the initial rounds. According to the National Archives and Records Administration, once officers realized he was still alive, one of them fired 2 shots at close range into his head, killing him instantly. Fellow Black Panther Harold Bell said that he heard the following exchange.
"That's Fred Hampton. Is he dead? Bring him out. He's barely alive. He'll make it."
The injured Panthers said they heard 2 shots. According to Hampton's supporters, the shots were fired point blank at Hampton's head. According to Johnson, an officer then said,
"He's good and dead now."
Hampton's body was dragged into the bedroom doorway and left in a pool of blood. The officers directed their gunfire at the remaining Panthers who had been sleeping in the north bedroom. This included Ronald Doc Satchel, age 18, Blair Anderson, age 18, Verlena Brewer, age 17, and Brenda Harris, age 19. Brewer, Satchel, Anderson, and Harris were seriously wounded, then beaten and dragged into the street. They were arrested on charges of aggravated assault and attempted murder of the officers. They were each held on $100,000 bail. In the early 1990s, Jose Chacha Jimenez, founder of the Young Lords, a Puerto Rican separatist street gang who had developed close ties to Hampton and the Chicago Black Panther Party during the late 1960s, interviewed Johnson about the raid. She said,
"I believe Fred Hampton was drugged. This conclusion comes from what I witnessed when someone tried to wake him, calling out, 'Chairman, Chairman,' while shaking his arm. Fred barely reacted. His arm was folded across the head of the bed, and he only lifted his head very slowly, almost as if in slow motion. His eyes were open, and he looked toward the bedroom entrance, but then gently laid his head back down. That was the only movement he made. It was evident he was heavily sedated, too impaired to respond even as danger approached."
The 7 Panthers who survived the raid were indicted by a grand jury on charges of attempted murder, armed violence, and other weapons charges. These charges were subsequently dropped. During the trial, the Chicago Police Department claimed that the Panthers were the first to fire shots, but a later investigation found that the Chicago police fired between 90 and 99 shots, while the only Panther shot was from Clark's dropped shotgun. After the raid, the apartment was left unguarded. The Panthers sent some members to investigate, accompanied by videographer Mike Gray and stills photographer Norris McNamara to document the scene. The footage was later released as part of the 1971 documentary, The Murder of Fred Hampton. After a break-in at an FBI office in Pennsylvania, the existence of COINTELPRO, an illegal counterintelligence program, was revealed and reported. With this program revealed, many activists and others began to suspect that the police raid and Hampton's killing were conducted under this program. One of the documents released after the break-in was a floor plan of Hampton's apartment. Another document outlined a deal that the FBI brokered with U.S. Deputy Attorney General Richard Kleindienst to conceal the FBI's role in Hampton's death and the existence of COINTELPRO. At a press conference the next day, the police announced the arrest team had been attacked by the violent and extremely vicious Panthers and defended themselves accordingly. In a second press conference on December 8, the police leadership praised the assault team for their remarkable restraint, bravery, and professional discipline in not killing all the Panthers present. Photographic evidence was presented of bullet holes allegedly made by shots fired by the Panthers, but reporters soon challenged this claim. An internal investigation was undertaken, and the police claimed that their colleagues on the assault team were exonerated of any wrongdoing, concluding that they used lawful means to overcome the assault. 2 days after the killings of Hampton and Clark, on December 6, 1969, members of the Weathermen destroyed numerous police vehicles in a retaliatory bombing spree at 3600 North, Halsted Street in Chicago. After that, the group became more radical. On May 21, 1970, the group issued a declaration of war against the U.S. government and for the first time used its new name, the Weather Underground Organization. They adopted fake identities and decided to pursue covert activities only. These initially included preparations to bomb a U.S. military non-commissioned officers' dance at Fort Dix, New Jersey, in what Brian Flanagan later said was intended to be the most horrific hit the United States government had ever suffered on its territory.
We've known that our job is to lead white kids into armed revolution. Kids know the lines are drawn. Revolution is touching all of our lives. Tens of thousands have learned that protest and marches don't do it. Revolutionary violence is the only way.
The police called their raid on Hampton's apartment a shootout, while the Black Panthers called it a shoot-in because so many shots were fired by police. On December 11th and 12th, the two competing daily newspapers, the Chicago Tribune and the Chicago Sun-Times, published vivid accounts of the events but drew different conclusions. The Tribune has long been considered the politically conservative newspaper and the Sun-Times the liberal paper. On December 11th, the Tribune published a page-one article titled, "Exclusive, Hanrahan, Police Tell Panther Story." The article included photographs supplied by Hanrahan's office that depicted bullet holes in a thin white curtain and door jamb as evidence that the Panthers fired multiple bullets at the police. Jack Challam, editor of the Wright College News, the student newspaper at Wright Junior College in Chicago, had visited the apartment on December 6th when it was still unsecured. He took numerous photographs of the crime scenes. A member of the Black Panthers was allowing visitors to tour the apartment. Challam's photographs did not show the bullet holes reported by the Tribune. On the morning of December 12th, after the Tribune article had appeared with the Hanrahan-supplied photos, Challam contacted a reporter at the Sun-Times, showed him his own photographs, and encouraged the other reporter to visit the apartment. That evening, the Sun-Times published a page-one article with the headline,
"Those bullet holes aren't."
According to the article, the alleged bullet holes, supposedly the result of the Panthers shooting in the direction of the police, were nail heads. 4 weeks after witnessing Hampton's death at the hands of the police, Johnson gave birth to their son, Fred Hampton Jr. Civil rights activists Roy Wilkins and Ramsey Clark, styled as the Commission of Inquiry into the Black Panthers and the Police, alleged that the Chicago police had killed Hampton without justification or provocation and had violated the Panthers' constitutional rights against unreasonable search and seizure. The commission further alleged that the Chicago Police Department had imposed a summary punishment on the Panthers. A federal grand jury did not return any indictment against any of the individuals involved with the planning or execution of the raid, including the officers involved in killing Hampton. O'Neill, who had given the FBI the floor plan of the apartment and drugged Hampton, later admitted his involvement in setting up the raid. He committed suicide on January 15, 1990. Shortly after the raid, Cook County Coroner Andrew Toman began forming a special 6-member coroner's jury to hold an inquest into the deaths of Hampton and Clark. On December 23rd, Toman announced 4 additions to the jury, who included 2 African-American men, physician Theodore K. Lawless and attorney Julian B. Wilkins, the son of J. Ernest Wilkins Sr. He said the 4 were selected from a group of candidates submitted to his office by groups and individuals representing both Chicago's black and white communities. Civil rights leaders and spokesmen for the black community were reportedly disappointed with the selection. An official with the Chicago Urban League said,
"I would have had more confidence in the jury if one of them had been a black man who has a rapport with the young and the grassroots in the community."
Gus Savage said that such a man to whom the community could relate need not be black. The jury eventually included a 3rd black man who had been a member of the first coroner's jury sworn in on December 4th. The Blue Ribbon Panel convened for the inquest on January 6, 1970. On January 21st, they ruled the deaths of Hampton and Clark to be justifiable homicides. The jury qualified their verdict on Hampton's death as based solely and exclusively on the evidence presented to this inquisition. Police and expert witnesses provided the only testimony during the inquest. Jury foreman James T. Hicks stated that the jury could not take into account the claims made by the surviving Black Panthers, who had reported that police opened fire as soon as they entered the apartment. The survivors declined to testify during the inquest as they were facing criminal charges of attempted murder and aggravated assault stemming from the raid. Attorneys representing the families of Fred Hampton and Mark Clark chose not to present any witnesses, instead denouncing the inquest as a well-rehearsed theatrical performance designed to vindicate the police officers. In response to the verdict, state's attorney Edward Hanrahan claimed it affirmed the truthfulness of our police officers' account of the events. During Hampton's funeral, over 5,000 people were in attendance. He was eulogized by black leaders, including Jesse Jackson and Ralph Abernathy, Martin Luther King Jr.'s successor as head of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. In his eulogy, Jackson said that when Fred was shot in Chicago, Black people in particular and decent people in general bled everywhere. Released on May 15, 1970, the reports of a federal grand jury criticized the actions of the police, the surviving Black Panthers, and the Chicago news media. The grand jury called the police department's raid ill-conceived and said many errors were committed during the post-raid investigation and reconstruction of the events. It said that the surviving Black Panthers' refusal to cooperate hampered the investigation and that the press improperly and grossly exaggerated stories. Still in 1970, the survivors and relatives of Hampton and Clark filed a civil suit stating that the civil rights of the Black Panther members were violated by the Joint Police or FBI raid and seeking $47.7 million in damages. 28 defendants were named, including Hanrahan as well as the City of Chicago, Cook County, and federal governments. It took years for the case to get to trial, which lasted 18 months. It was reported to have been the longest federal trial up to that time. After its conclusion in 1977, Judge Joseph Sam Perry of the United States District Court for the Northern District of Illinois dismissed the suit against 21 of the defendants before jury deliberations. After jurors deadlocked on a verdict, Perry dismissed the suit against the remaining defendants. The plaintiffs appealed the initial decision. In 1979, the United States Court of Appeals for the Seventh Circuit in Chicago ruled that the government had withheld key documents, thereby obstructing the judicial process. As a result, the court reinstated the case against 24 of the defendants and ordered a new trial. In 1980, the U.S. Supreme Court reviewed an appeal by the defendants, but in a 5-3 decision, remanded the case back to the district court for a new trial. In 1982, the City of Chicago, Cook County, and the federal government agreed to a settlement in which each would pay $616,333, equivalent to $2.01 million per payee as at 2024, to a group of 9 plaintiffs, including the mothers of Hampton and Clark. The $1.85 million settlement, equivalent to $6.03 million in 2024, was believed to be the largest ever in a civil rights case. G. Flint Taylor, one of the attorneys representing the plaintiffs, said,
"The settlement is an admission of the conspiracy that existed between the FBI and Hanrahan's men to murder Fred Hampton."
Assistant United States Attorney Robert Gruenberg said the settlement was intended to avoid another costly trial and was not an admission of guilt or responsibility by any of the defendants. Fred Hampton's life was a threat not because he carried weapons or incited violence, but because he empowered the powerless, united the divided, and dared to dream of a world where justice was real. At just 21, he shook the very foundations of systemic racism and state control. That's why the government feared him. That's why he was silenced. But his legacy? It lives on in every community program, in every cry for justice, in every act of resistance against oppression. Fred Hampton did not die in vain. His voice still echoes, reminding us that real change demands courage, unity, and sacrifice. If this story moved you, help keep his memory alive. Like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to our channel for more untold Black history that deserves to be heard. Thanks for watching. See you in our next video.